Force on Force features the largest and strongest outdoor military organization in the country. These are the men and women who make it possible to enjoy the freedom to hunt and fish. It is with great pride that we bring you Force on Force podcast, coming to you from the Force on Force Talk.
Hey, welcome to the Force on Force podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Dalrymple. I'm actually home for this edition of the Force on Force podcast, coming to you from the Talk. We've been on the road and the Force on Force Talk coming to you from the last month or so, going all the way from Oklahoma to OHIV to the Bassmaster Classic, and then came home for a few days and then back at Red Crest. But I'm finally back home, and I wish it was a good time to be back home, but we've got a lot of flooding here in Kentucky. So a lot of thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that's been affected. I mean, just in downtown Shepherdsville, not too far from my house. I mean, a lot of flooding there. And then Louisville, we're not expected to see the crest of the Ohio River for another day or so. But I wanted to do a podcast this week because the Bassmaster Elite Series is headed, to North Carolina, to the Albemarle Sound area, the Pasquotank River. So I'm going to bring on a friend of mine, a longtime friend, Hal Abshire, from what I'll refer to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, but he's actually Sanford, North Carolina. Isn't that correct, Hal? More or less. Yeah. So Hal knew me as a young lieutenant at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And Hal and I's connection goes back to the Carolina Bassers and formation of people have heard me talk about with Army Bass Anglers about Warriors on the Water and really where all this kind of comes from. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to have him on there and talk a little bit about that connection and our time at Bragg, and just not just that, but because the elites are going to where they're going. That was actually one of my favorite areas to go fish, which is, we fished I've mainly stayed in the Roanoke River of the Albemarle Sound, Hal, but it's a fun place to go fish, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And it's, at one time it went down and with the storms had come in and had messed it up, but it just came back really fantastic. I really look for the Pasquotank to really shine. The only bad thing is, like we say, weather always messes up. If there's a tournament, we're going to have weather. And this one here is not any different. So BASS is going to be hit with a frost warnings tonight. And so I think that another day of practice in the cold, and we'll see what it does to the fish and spawning time wise and everything. But the river system I think will really shine. And a lot of people can't even pronounce half the rivers on there. I get tipped with all these guys and where they was going to. And so it's kind of unique. But I think that, once your viewers kind of watch it on TV, they're going to see, it looks like you're going back in time in a lot of the rivers. It's very, very unique. Yeah.
It is, Hal. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but, I want to, let's tell your story a little bit, because you're not a stranger to the military yourself and bass fishing, being Army Bass Anglers, Army, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. I mean, you're a retired Air Force guy. That's really at the heart of what we do. So, and kind of give your background of fishing and how that being in the service and everything like that, Hal.
Well, it was unique because I was stationed right back here at home. So Pope Air Force Base was my home base. And so that's how I started the Carolina Bassers back then. I wanted to have military and the civilians to kind of be together and form a big group. And because I knew what it's like for guys just to come to a base that, was away from their homes and they loved to hunt or they loved to fish. So that was the one main reason why I started this club. And so it really, the combination, you had Army and Air Force guys, and you had farmers, you had factory workers, you had all kinds of people, and they become friends. Everybody just become good friends. And that's what I wanted to do with that. So, and I spent 20 years in the Air Force and I was able to fish and serve at the same time. So I love doing both. And so, it was just a great combination to do.
And so I say that because he is really a subject matter expert. You can't go around that part of North Carolina and mention his name and somebody not know who he is. Yeah. So yeah, people know who Hal is. So I bring him on kind of the podcast and to talk about this Elite Series event. I thought it was funny when you said about people can't even say the names correctly. I heard somebody trying to say the Chowan earlier today on a TikTok deal, and I got to laughing at how they were trying to say it. Oh my goodness, it was so funny, and I'm like, that's not how you say it at all.
Oh, I
You know,
agree.
it,
I heard another group talking to shoe one, and
it,
I mean, the only thing I've heard them pronounce right was a Roanoke,
right.
but it's just it's been hilarious with all the different rivers and everything too. What they've done. So we'll see if they get to know it a lot better after this. So, but Bass had been there 3 times back in '75. They had a Bassmaster Classic at the Currituck Sound, and that's when Jack Haynes he won it. And then they had invitationals in 1980 and 81. But there really wasn't a lot of weight. One, I think it was like 40 some pounds on both of the events. But in my fantasy league, I put 80 pounds. I put like 83 pounds because I feel like it's really going to shine. I think it's really, really going to. They're hitting it at the right time. They're hitting it at the right time for it. So,
Yeah.
and it's just a matter of what this weather's going to do, and the winds too. We'll see. Some of these guys are going to travel a good ways on this, Shawn. I mean, for coming out of Elizabeth City, some of them's going to run to the show one and Roanoke, and you have the strong winds across that big old flat Albemarle Sound. It'll rock your world. Let me tell you, I've been there at the Pascal Tank. I've been in those storms, and it'll blow. It'll blow hard on you, but it'll take them a good hour to get down there. But they'll do it. They'll end up doing it.
Well, Hal, correct me if I'm not wrong. I've never been brave enough to run across that sound as many times we fished there. I mean, I remember going out there one time, me and my dad down there fun fishing, and we run out to the mouth, and man, it was just the weather out there was just horrible, right? But I think one of the issues that you have running across the sound is not just the weather, but was the crab pots and things throughout the sound. Can you talk a little bit about so the listeners kind of understand that situation?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the pots out there, you've got to be real careful. You'll see used to be nets out there too in different areas. We'd always have to be careful about it. But if nowadays, and I agree with you, back in those days, we didn't have the bigger boats to do what we're doing now. We didn't have the stronger boats, if you will, to run across there. But now, if I'm fishing out of Chowan River, a lot of times I'll run over across to the Roanoke, and you've got an opening that you have to aim for from 8 miles away, and you have to watch the weather all day long to make sure you can even get back. So, and then you've got to realize not only is the crab pots out there, but you better watch out for stumps when you're cutting across in certain areas, and especially the opening going into Roanoke. But running out in Albemarle Sound is not deep, and I think that's what waves, knock it all out and everything about. But it's definitely it's going to be a attention getter, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there's some great fishing there, and I love what you said in the opening, kind of like people are going to look like going back in time. I think that's one of my favorite memories about going there and fishing over the years was, man, you could go there and not see another boat for 4 days you were there because you could get back up there in some places, and it was beautiful back up in those places,
We used to joke that we'd see some big old cypress trees and Spanish moss hanging down off of it, and we'd always say, I wonder if Daniel Boone's seen the same tree. It's just that's how old they are and everything. But great fishing. Can't wait for some of these guys to think they got a gigantic bass and it's going to be a big old blackfish, mudfish, and with teeth. And so they good time with that as well. If you remember catching some of those on
it'll break your heart and tear up your bait, and all in the same deal, You think you got a kicker, and you realize that you ain't got nothing but just tore your bait up So,
And I've had so many times thinking I had a gigantic fish for sure.
now,
Yeah.
can you talk a
But
little bit about this too? It just may be. It always seemed like it. It's it's brackish tidal water, but it doesn't act like normal tidal water like anywhere else I've ever been. There's not like a huge fluctuation in the water level.
right. In fact, I mean, you're just looking at a little bit down. I can always remember and kind of think that I would always have like a lull period, just a little bit of lull period. And I think that might have been just a little bit of tide change. But unless you just notice it, it's hard to really just notice it. So I really don't pay attention to that when I'm fishing a Roanoke or show one.
Yeah,
But so it's more wind driven.
yeah,
And I'll give you an example. Last year, as you know, me and my partner Keith Barker, we won a championship there, 2-day championship, and we had almost 40 pounds for 2 days. We had 19 something each day. But what we found was the current was really flowing out towards the sound, and the wind was blowing in. So it just grouped these fish up in ditches, and I mean it was like a buffet. I mean it was honestly, it was so good that I mean even when we was throwing crankbaits, I caught so many that they pulled the rings out of front of my crankbait the second day. At the end of the day, that's how much fish we had caught. We caught them on plastics, we caught them on cranks, spinner baits, buzz baits, everything. So if you get the winds just right going in there, coming against the current coming out, oh, it's great. So really, there's not that much of a current. I mean, other than when the wind's blowing. When the wind's blowing it out or in, that's when you'll see it. So I would tell you that they're going to find that the rivers are more wind driven and everything. So
yeah, and I think that's gonna be education when people are watching Bassmaster Live. They're gonna think, well, when's high tide, when's low tide? They're not gonna see what they're used to seeing in a normal tournament. And I think that's gonna be an education just to kind of understand that it's a different system. And my understanding, it's always been because it's buffered by the outer banks pretty well that you don't see that big drop in it like you do. Say you go south down the coastline, or you're in Louisiana and places like that, or that you see a huge drop in the tidal tide levels. So
yeah, that's a sound. You'll see that. That's correct. That's a good way to put it. And I'm going to tell you, it will not surprise me if you don't see guys taking a ride out there instead of going down towards these rivers and go into the Currituck.
yeah, yeah.
So now you're really looking at the ocean on the other side of the bank. So I think some people are going to be surprised at that, but it's going to happen too.
The other thing is this place. I'm like you. I'm interested to see the weights that come out of this place because I know stories from back in the day before the hurricane. Was it Fran that went through and kind of messed it up back in the day, if I remember my stories correctly?
Correct. Yeah.
Man, we talk about these mega bags today. I've heard stories about mega bags coming out of that different rivers off that sound that were just unheard of back in the day, back there.
Yeah. In fact, about 2 years ago, I know a tournament guy caught a 12-pounder out and brought it in.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, they're there. They are there. That's for sure. But I think that you're going to see 25 to 28 pounds for the first day easily. I really do. And I'm just waiting to see what giants are going to be brought in. I think you'll see 7 and 8 pounders, but we'll see if there's anyone coming in with 10-pounder or not. So we'll kind of see that. That's going to be tough, but I think 7, 8 pounder, maybe 9-pounder too. So I've caught some big ones out there, but nothing in that range above that. So, but it's a great fishery. Like I said, the history there is unreal. The fisheries has just really, really rebounded after the storms and everything. So they really took care of it and everything. So, like you said, and when you go back in there, you can go back, way back up in them places, like, and you're just in another world. Uh, it's pretty cool. Uh, when you're throwing a frog up around them cypress trees and just blow up and blow up. So it's pretty neat deal on that as well. So, but
Well, that's the first place I ever had an encounter with a bear too. I remember, yeah, that's the first place I ever had an encounter with a bear was down there. I mean, I remember being up in a ditch and well, you know, and I heard something behind me. This bear had come down to get him a drink out of the water, and I thought, well, you could have it. I'm gonna ease on out of here, you know. So
and people don't believe a lot of times when you say that. I've actually had two encounters. One jumped into water right in front of me. I was fishing a beaver dam and I cut into the Cashier River, and the bear jumped right in front of me. It looked like a dog swimming across there. He shook and everything, turned around and saw me. Then he took off. He was knocking everything down, which I'm glad he did. But the last time was a bear swam across the Roanoke, come up behind me, and get up on a flat, and a guy's blowing his horn on his boat, and we kind of turn around. The bear's standing up on his hind legs, looking around, you know. So people don't realize them bears will come out, and they're not going to bother you, but it's just the fact of being everything. So yeah, they actually have a bear festival up there on the Roanoke to honor all the bears and everything's up there. So it's pretty neat deal. You're right. I forgot about all the bears up there too. So
yeah,
you know.
It's just a neat place. That's why I say we talk about like being in the military and getting to travel around and fish a lot of different places. And I think that's one thing I've been blessed over the years is getting to fish some of those places like that. It's just really, really cool to see some of those places like that. And the Albemarle Sound was one of those places. And to be honest with you, it can be a little bit more intimidating than like going to Kentucky Lake or somewhere like that. You know, because it's just because of the fact of you talk about you don't have a lot of civilization around when you're out there fishing it. You know,
Correct. Yeah.
but it's such a beautiful place, and just I think you're going to see power fishing really play a place in this whole tournament as part of this. I mean, I think this is set up to be a power fishing event. So I'm interested to see who kind of stands up and who kind of comes to the forefront with it being more of a power fishing deal as part of this. So it'll be interesting kind of from that perspective because I don't know. We talk about forward facing sonar a lot. I mean, is I don't know that it sets up a whole lot for them to do a lot of that on the Roanoke River. Or not Roanoke, but just all the rivers around there. Always say Roanoke because I went there so many times, but uh, so
Well, I think if they use it, they'll use it for fishing around the wood, the stumps that are not so much the stumps, but the laydowns that that's sticking up out of the water. I think they'll use it for that, where they can see underneath of them that way and fish for them. But I think that you'll see a lot more power fishing as well. I really do. I think like Greg Hackney, being a big flipper that he is and everything, I think Brian Smith, being a guy been up on the Potomac, I think that he'll do good just because he's a river fisherman.
right.
So I know that Trey McKinney had a great practice there in February. So there's a lot of guys that I know that that's fishing this for the first time. All of them. I don't know any of them that had fished it either. I think this might be one of those practices that's going to be the first time for a lot of them. And a lot of them has said that they did. Well, of course, they didn't even know how to pronounce it, let alone fish it. So,
I mean, we'd be remiss to say if there weren't people trying to call and get information about it that it caused a big stir in the bass fishing world, whether it was trying to find out similar places to it or whatever. I mean, that's how unknown to place it was to everybody. So I think a lot of people. I just that when I saw it pop up on the schedule, it just kind of made me smile because it's a place that I've been to and started my military career at Fort Bragg, and I spent a lot of one of the places I loved to go fish when we got to go fishing when I was
Right.
there. Um,
Right.
I mean,
And you think about this when you see it on national TV. Look at the memories that it bring back to you. Like you said, back in when you was a young lieutenant, and you were still trying to hide that crankbait from me that your dad kept telling me about. So your dad actually gave me a bunch of those. So don't.
yeah,
That's how good. You know that, though.
yeah, I know. That's okay. That's okay. But
Oh yeah.
hey, it was we had a lot of fun, and it was always a fun trips when we went to the Roanoke Albemarle Sound area, and we just come in the Carolina Bastards. We usually went to the Roanoke and went out of there, and so it was a lot of fun times going out of that area.
Yeah.
You just because the direction we were coming from, that was the best place for us to go. And yeah, it brings back a lot of memories. But I mean, just in general, I mean, that whole time at Bragg brings back a lot of memories. I say to this all the time, like I get asked by a lot of high school kids, and they go, "Well, how do you work in the outdoor industry? How do you get to do what you do now?" And I talk about the time. It goes back to my time at Fort Bragg, right? I don't, I really cherish it. And so when I say that, I always talk about what we did with Warriors on the Water and in the beginning of all that and how all that kind of came together. I think that is one of the most special memories I have in in my life, both professionally from a military officer, but also as a fisherman. You know, it really means a lot. I mean, when you think about what's your memory of Warriors on the Water and how all that, and just kind of explain to everybody what it was.
Warriors on the Water was one of these deals where there was three of us sit down with, you know, we sit down at a table at a restaurant, and during lunch hour, we just said, "Hey, look, we want to do something. We don't. There's so many golf tournaments going all over the place, and they're taking soldiers, airmen out and doing this and doing that, and said, let's do something that we enjoy. Let's do a fishing deal." So we just kind of put that together, and then I came to you and a few others to help me with it, and you know, look what we had to do. I mean, we put everything together in 6 weeks' time. And our very first tournament we had it was on Sharon Harris Lake, North Carolina, and we had like 78 boats, and all 78 boats carried an Army, Air Force, Navy, or Marine out, and we had a good old fashioned tournament. And but the deal was, I also I was always pretty good with little promotion PR stuff, so I got Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base and local newspapers to come out and cover it. And they took some beautiful pictures and really got the interest up of all the locals and everything. And at the end of it, two reporters come up to me and said, Hal, we had a great day. We enjoyed, filming and interviewing everybody. Great concepts. But what are you going to do for next year? And there was just a calm came over the water, and all the boats was lined up on the water. And I said, you know what? We're going to make it bigger and better. So I go up to Greg Lahr and Bob Cunningham, who was with me when we first started, and I said, guys, looks like we're going to have to do this again next year. And they both got excited, and they said, are you kidding me? We have no money. We didn't do, we just done this for time. I said, nope. I said, I looked across that water again. I said, you remember the movie Field of Dreams? I said, we're going to build it and they will come. Little did I know how big that was. So as you know, it took 6 weeks to put that one together. The next one from then on, like 6 months to put it together. And, you was with me in the very beginning on all this as well. And, all the stuff we had to go through to get everything, just logistics of having all the services there as well. And So I had a lot of contacts with FLW, Forest Hill Wood Group then. And next thing you know, I'm getting a stage. And I got directors coming in. I got, all this, boom, 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 come in. And next thing you know, we are out there looking at, and so many friendships have been made from this event. It was unreal. So it was just really a fantastic event because we had flyovers for the beginning. We had, we would have paratroopers drop in. We had the Golden Knights drop in. The Lady Golden Knights made a historical move they had never done before. They jumped in 4 of our boats as they flew over, and they landed on 4 boats. And I didn't know that then. That was a historical jump for them. So they filmed all that. And if you go to the Golden Knights Museum, you will actually see that as well. And if you see the light blue boat with watermarks all in it, that's my boat, by the way. But it's just amazing. It went from doing it for the one day. Warriors on the Water lasted for 3 days. The first night, if you remember, we had what we called the icebreaker, and we would bring everybody on Fort Bragg, and the boaters got to meet their military partner. And not only that, but we had so many sponsors that they gave so much stuff out. And I mean, Lou's come in with rods, reels, so many people come in with different things. And the guys just had open bags and walked through the line and was given everything. And then we had special guest speakers and everything come in. We had so many pros. We had Hank Parker. We had Forrest L. Wood. We had Jimmy Houston. We had so many of the pros. Gerald Swindle come up, and I think he had the crowd laughing so hard they couldn't even see straight, the one night and everything. But I don't know how many pros didn't come to this thing. It was just crazy good. I mean, but one thing we made sure too we put a yellow ribbon around the front of the boats, tied on each trolling motor as a welcome home, and we put American flag on every light pole. So to this day, when I see somebody with an American flag still on their light pole, it's like a common bond. We all see each other, know each other, from that. And plus we had T-shirts made. We had jackets made every year for everybody. So I still see a Warriors on the Water T-shirt or a jacket, worn on social media. So it's kind of really, really neat to see. So, and like I said, you was there in the very beginning with me as well. So you're seeing it grow as well.
Yeah, it was always special. I mean, I just remember we put that together, and I remember coming to your office and telling you, like, it's just funny how things work out, because I remember saying, like, hey, you guys had already had that meeting, and I had a thought about wanted to do something too, and you said, it's funny you could come see me, because you said, let me tell you about a meeting we had. And so we were like, and that is everything kind of spurred out of that. And I remember, like, my job was to figure out how we turn that thing into a nonprofit legally, because that was the hardest thing we had to do as part of that,
Right.
And I think I take some of those lessons still today, and I use those from what I do now. And even I took those, and when I built the UNA bass fishing team, I took some of those lessons to when I built that team and worked with that. And I think that's why that stands such a big, and really, I say some of, we own the Fishing for Freedom out of Fort Hood now. And that's why I do that piece, because it ties back to that very event at Warriors on the Water, and where my heart is, and where it kind of came from along the way, and I think that's such a special part of that. I mean, there's so much that came out of that. I mean, you talk about Forrest Woods being a part of that, and part of that was Ron Inslin, and he was a rep for Ranger at the time. And I remember him inviting me to the FLW Cup the year after I come home from Afghanistan. And I remember actually seeing him and Forrest Woods in Charlotte for the FLW Cup. I don't know if it's Cup, or I can't remember what it was that year that was in Charlotte. That's just as I got back after command. and Forrest Woods took a Arkansas Game and Fish coin out of his wallet and gave it to me.
Cool.
And so I'm in my office right now, and all my coins, I have a couple that are very special, and that's probably one of my top coins. And this is over. I've got 4-star general coins and things like that, but that coin means a lot to me because when he gave it to me, and he gave it to me because the relationship and the things we had done with the Warriors on the Water, and they had given so much back, and they had sent me a bunch of hats to Afghanistan when I was a company commander because of our relationship we had with the Warriors on the Water. And there was just so much that touched so many lives that were part of that through fishing, that the stories that we could just tell for that would just be unbelievable. Just one of many reasons that Hal is known across that part of North Carolina. I mean, he's a pretty dang good fisherman. He he can catch them. If he can, he stays out of going to the doctor. He's pretty good at getting out there catching. He likes to go have knee replacements and all these things here lately and keep him off the water. But he's pretty good at catching them and being good to be out there, an ambassador for the sport. But he's also an ambassador for service members too, and really you'll see him doing so much across different places there when it comes show season there in North Carolina. You never can tell when Hal's going to show up and MC an event, and
Yeah,
I think
I'm actually fishing a tournament coming up, Shawn. It's called Take a Warrior Fishing.
Right.
So that's a national group now. So I'm actually fishing that here the 19th of this month on Jordan Lake.
Gotcha.
So I did one a couple of years ago on Sharon Harris Lake with them. So I'll be doing another one. So this is kind of like we did, but not on the scale that we did. But it's still great to have, the military being honored, the veterans being honored. So I'll be doing that one here April the 19th, going out of Jordan Lake, going out of the same landing that I had ours at Jordan. So it'll be interesting. I'm on some good fish right now, so I'm hoping I can take my military counterpart and hope that we can do very, very good. So it's been very, very good is what I'll say. So my big fish so far off the lake has been like 8.5 pounder last week. And so I'm hoping, what I'd love to do is get my military counterpart that I draw to catch a big fish and get it in, and make them, as I always said, when I brought them across the stage, I said I wanted to make them a rock star for a day. And so many of these young men and women never picked up a rod and reel in their life, but yet they can drive $1 million tank or pilot an airplane, but yet had never been fishing. And so many of them said they were going to take up fishing after that. I don't know how many friendships have been actually made from that event. And that event lasted 13 or 14 years, and then COVID hit and kind of disbanded everything. But I ran it for 10 years, and then I stepped down to let others, take it over. But, it was near and dear to my heart. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for sure. When it was all over, you just kind of let the air out finally, and before you knew it, you were already starting on the new year. But like I said, it was amazing how many people still talk about Warriors on the Water today. Every time they see me, when are you going to start it back? When are you going to start it back? They don't realize how hard it was to get that in the first place.
Yeah. I think one of my highlights of my career, Hal, was being a major at Fort Campbell, and there was a major there that knew I loved to fish and everything. He starts talking. He goes, man, you'd love this thing they do at Fort Bragg. Man, it's this awesome thing to do like every year called Warriors on the Water. And I just started laughing. And he's like, He's like, "What's funny?" I said, "Well, I was part of the whole help bringing that whole thing to life." He goes, "You're serious?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "There's a long story behind that." I said I was there in the beginning when it all came about, and I said, but for me, that kind of brings it full
They
circle to
killed
like,
lawyers
do what?
for me.
Yeah, I was. That's my story right there, dealing with the lawyers, trying to figure that piece out. And but just it brought it full circle to me to like you sometimes do things, especially when you're in the military, you don't maybe not always see the fruits of the labor, but it is kind of nice sometimes to get to see that down the road. And just that's why I chuckled and laughed, because it was so fun to just see that, you know, and be like, see that still that many years later, it was still impacting people, because ultimately you always want to leave things better than the way you found it. And I always thought that we left things better than the way we found it. And I think that's the key in what we do in life and what we do with fishing, and just how you can be a better person is leave things better than the way you found it, you know. And I think that was so key with that event. We left things better than the way you found it. And besides, there's some great fishing up there in North Carolina. I don't think it gets enough credit sometimes. It gets overlooked. I mean, Jordan Lake's got some big bass in it. Falls has got some big bass in it. Harris was a pretty good fishery, and it's it's gone through some stuff, you know.
You can leave out of it now. So
Yeah, you can leave it out now. But I mean, at one time, I mean, it was a dynamic place to fish up there. I mean, you being at Fort Bragg was an awesome place to be stationed at, be in the military if you like to fish, you
Harris
know.
was rated top 100 lakes in in the United States. You know, grass grass is gone now. Carp is in there by the millions, seems like. So everything is running the lake. So it could be, but we still have Jordan Lake. We have Falls Lake. And if people remember, MLF came there and they did the three different lakes, and they did Sharon Harris for the top 10 guys for the championship.
Yeah,
And Prosnick won it. And Prosnick won it in one of my cuts in there. So Keith and I went there and watched him win. I told him he was going to win it right where he was at, and sure enough. So
yeah,
if you hear Prosnick at the end of it, if you ever watch a rerun of it or go on YouTube, you'll hear Prosnick saying he was going to Disney World after he won. That's because I looked at him when he was coming up to my boat, and I said, "You're going to Disney World now since you just won." And so that's when he said it. So they left that little part in there that he done. So that's pretty cool.
yeah,
But the lakes here are very good. You know, everything's in good shape other than Harris. But the river systems is phenomenal right now, and I think that North Carolina is really going to show. It's really going to show up. I think it's going to be a big deal. I love to see, you know, some big events come back to Carr Lake and Gaston like they used to. You know, used to go out Carr Lake and bass would come into there years ago. So maybe to bring back to North Carolina, get us a little limelight in there again. That would be good.
yeah.
And,
I think it would be. I think that it's a great part of the country for a lot of reasons, and I enjoyed my time there. I always tell Hal I'm going to get back up there. Just my schedule doesn't let me back up there right now. But I definitely want to get back up there and fish, because there's some great fisheries up there in North Carolina, and brings back a lot of memories. I think all the listeners are going to kind of see this year with the elites being out there. I think it's going to bring some really cool different types of fishing on that Albemarle Sound. So we're going to see how it all works out. Hey, Hal, I appreciate you taking your time tonight to kind of sit down and share stories from the past and what you think about the upcoming tournament on the elites. Man, I know that you always been a big part of everything I do, and I appreciate all that. If you want to know more about Army bass, buck, hog, duck, or redfish, go to forceonforcetv.com, and we'll see you next time. Cool.
Thanks for listening to the Force on Force podcast. Join us next time as we dive into more topics from the Force on Force talk. For more information or to learn how to join the organization, visit our website at forceonforcetv.com.